And so we are here with homework 13. But before we begin homework 13, I do want to take a moment to just discuss an idea and take some notes about something so that homework 13 will make a little bit more sense. And so that being said, we are going to be talking about this concept of the square root of -1. Now, the square root of -1 is not possible to find because if we were to take the square root of 1, we would say, oh, that's, let's do that actually. The square root of 1 is positive or -1 because 1 times 1 makes 1, and -1 times -1 makes 1. There is no way for me to get -1 because two negatives multiplied by each other makes a positive, and two positives multiplied by each other makes a positive. And so to take the square root of -1, we need something that we haven't discussed previously, and that is this variable called I. And actually the square root of -1 is defined as I. And so when you see a lowercase I in math, what that is actually representing is the square root of -1. And so, again, I is not the answer. It's just a shorter way of writing the square root of -1. And so the way that that's going to pertain to our work today is, let's say that we had something like the square root of -4. Well, we need to first recognize that we cannot get the square root of -4 because 2 times 2 makes 4, and -2 times -2 also makes +4. There is no way to get -4. And so what we need to do instead is split -4 into two factors, and those two factors will be 4 and -1. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, -1 is equivalent to I, which some people call imaginary numbers. We're going to call them complex numbers. And so we're going to replace the square root of -1 with I, and we'll replace 4, just like we have before. The square root of 4 is either positive or -2. And so the square root of -4 is equal to positive or -2i. And again, I is just a shorter way of writing the square root of -1. That's going to be the only new thing in today's homework. So I think this one is going to go pretty quickly. And so the way we look at this is the same as we have previously. We have 80, which does not have a perfect square root. So we're going to have to break that into its factors. And so let's go ahead and do that. We've got 80 has factors 1 and 80, 2 and 40, 4 and 20. 5 goes in there 16 times. 6, no. 7, no. 8 and 10. And that's going to be it. So we will look for the largest number there that has a perfect square root, and it is 16. So we want to split that 80 into 5 and 16, but recognize that it's negative. So we also want a -1, square root of -1 in there. So we'll go through this process. We've got the square root of -80. We have the perfect square root of 16 in there, times the square root of 5, and this is what we've done in previous lessons. Now we need to deal with that negative sign, and so we're going to put a -1 here at the end. And so if we had 16 times 5, that would make 80, and then times -1 would make -80. And so that -1 at the end is really the only thing that we're adding to the work that we've done previously. And so similarly to what we've done previously, the square root of 16 is positive or -4. The square root of 5 is 5. Or the square root of 5 is still the square root of 5. And at the end, square root of -1 is I. And I'm going to check something really quick, and I'll be right back. Okay, and I was just checking how Alex is going to prefer to have these written. And so it looks like Alex is actually going to want the I in front of the square root symbol. Recognize that in what I've done here, the I is outside of that square root symbol. It is not attached to that 5. But what Alex is going to want is for you to put positive or negative for I square root of 5. And so again, I'm just trying to match my notation with the way that Alex is going to do it. And we can also see that Alex will also have I in the beginning in front of the 3, but either one of those will work, I suppose. So that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to number 2. And so square root of negative 90, just like we've done in the past, we've got 90, 1 and 90, 2 and 45, 3 and 30, 4 and, nope, 4 doesn't work, 5 and 18, 6 and 15, 7, no, 8, no, 9 and 10. And so we will find our largest perfect square. Looks like our largest perfect square is 9. And so the pair that we will use is 9 and 10. And don't forget that we need to add a square root of negative 1 to that as well, which is going to turn into I. So square root of negative 90. If I break that into its factors, I will have the square root of 9. I like to put my perfect square first. Times the square root of 10 times the square root of negative 1. And so let's recall that the square root of 9 is either positive or negative 3. The square root of 10 is going to stay the square root of 10, and the square root of negative 1 is going to be I. And as I mentioned in the last problem, Alex is going to want that I after the 3. So positive or negative 3, I times the square root of 10. So what we've got for number 2. And number 3, similar to what we've done before. Square root of negative 72, so 72. Factors are 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 and 14, no, 24, 4 and 18, 6 and 12, 9 and 8, I'm going to reverse those, 8 and 9. And I know that I'm done because if I was to continue, I would end up with going past 8, I would get to 9, and I would be done. I'm getting a phone call, so I'm going to pause and be right back. Okay, we're back. And so looking for the largest perfect square, it looks like 36 is going to be it. So the pair that I'm going to use is 2 and 36. So I'm going to break the square root of negative 72 into the square root of 36 times the square root of 2 times the square root of negative 1. And so square root of 36 is positive or negative 6. Square root of 2 is going to still be the square root of 2. And the square root of negative 1 is I. And so as I mentioned, Alex is going to want it as 6I square root of 2. Okay. And so that's it for that. Moving on to number 4. We have the square root of negative 60, so factors of 60, 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10. 7, 8, 9, and 10 I've already got. So we look for our biggest perfect square. I wonder if it's going to be 4. I think so. So 4 is going to be our biggest perfect square. And 15 is its partner. So square root of negative 60 will be the square root of 4 times the square root of 15 times the square root of negative 1. And so we've got positive or negative 2 times the square root of 15 times I. And so again, that I needs to be placed after the 2. And so we're going to end up with positive or negative 2, I square root of 15, 4, number 4. And I think that's it. That is it for this homework assignment. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have an awesome day.